We're going to continue talking about the buying experience, especially talking about in-store stimuli, and then we're going to move into how products are used and, more importantly, disposed of, what options are available right now that maybe were less popular or common in the past. So first, the whole idea about shopping as an experience has already been brought up in the previous presentation, right? So if you buy the story that is not just about the product, but it's about the overarching situation that surrounds the consumers when they actually go shopping, you will see that there are different atmospheric options that can be offered by the retailer, right? And the idea behind this is basically to try to tell a story, right? To convey a sense of a unique experience of the shopping trip, right? And there are different themes, obviously, they can be used, like in any other good storytelling. There are different types of stories, right? There are some natural themes, like if you go to Cabela's, for example, it's not just about the products that are available, right? It's about, all the taxidermy that it's around. It's about the decorations. There is water, right? They have huge fish tanks, maybe a waterfall. So it kind of gives you a sense for how it will feel to be on the outdoors, right? So you can convey a lot by this. In fact, my kids love going to Cabela's, even though they are not interested in any of the products, just because it's such a unique experience, right? But it doesn't have to be nature-inspired themes. There are other themes that are obviously possible, right? Man-made places, right? Futuristic and tech-inspired spaces, right? Very minimalist, with sharp edges and unique shapes, a combination of materials, stainless steel, concrete, as opposed to warmer materials like wood, etc., right? So this idea of creating an atmospheric experience, it's actually it's very popular. People are willing usually to pay more money because of the overall experience, or if they are not willing to pay more money, at least they are more willing to go to experience it. So because of that, your sales still will be higher anyway, and they will enable you to basically offer a unique product that goes beyond the physical product, and that it's maybe harder to copy by your competitors. And now, along with the atmospherics, you have the overall store image, right? Which is kind of capturing this idea of positioning that we've been harping on during the class. So the idea of a store having its own brand and its own personality, right? So it's how people perceive the store. And even before you go to the store, you kind of already envision what it is that you expect to receive depending on the kind of store they are talking about, right? And this is going to be composed of a set of features of the store, right? Where it is located, right? If it's a more upscale store, it should be located in an upscale mall, right? Or an upscale location, okay? And also the kind of merchandise that is actually at the store, the kind of products that are available to the public. Also other elements like, the degree of service that it's available. So how many salespeople are around the store, and by salespeople I don't mean greeters at the door, I mean people that can actually help you. And also not only how many are there, but how knowledgeable are they, right? If you ask them about technical features of a product, so if you go to Best Buy, for example, you start asking one of the salespeople about a laptop, for example, how much can they tell you about the laptop? Do they really understand the different types of RAM that are available and how the RAM speed is going to have an impact in how fast the computer is overall, right? So how knowledgeable it is. And that whole host of factors is going to determine how you perceive the store overall, right? So it's not just about advertising something. It's not about telling people that you are an upscale store or you are a great customer service store. But obviously you need to have the pieces in place that will give you that kind of experience when you actually get to the store. Now here I have two pictures of two stores that I'm sure you've been to many times, Walmart and Target, right? Now, interestingly enough, they are both very similar in terms of the number of SKUs that they have available, meaning the number of different products that you can find on the shelves. They are also very similar about the scope of the products that you can find. So a lot of the products that you can find in one, you can find in the other. I would say at least there is 80% overlap, right? But the feel and the personality of the stores is very different. Walmart over the years has targeted mostly cash strapped customers, people that are more conscientious about their finances and people that are trying to basically stretch their budget as far as possible. On the other hand, Target has a different position and is trying to be a little bit more upscale, a little bit more of a better experience. So the way the store is designed is different. The way you can find some products that you cannot find at the other store also kind of enhances that feeling, and the kind of additional services that are available at the store will also help in that overall personality or feeling when you actually go to the store. So this idea of store personality or store image is very, very powerful, and it can really make or break a store altogether. Good. Now, what other type of in-store stimuli do you have to actually think about? Well, you have point of purchase stimuli, right? So I have, for example, here this Nutella display. Now, if I was going to the store with my kids and they were to see this Nutella, I will never hear the end of it, right? It will be the entire trip telling me why we need to buy some Nutella, right? And they'll come up with all sort of occasions in which we can use it, whether it's for breakfast or whatever, right? They'll just come up with things to tell me why it's a good idea, right? And so this point of purchase stimuli might work, especially in situations where people are highly involved, like in the case of my kids, right? But it goes beyond this, right? The way we go about shopping, for the most part, a lot of people will have their, if you go grocery shopping, for example, they have their list, whether it's a mental list or a physical list of the products that they are interested in purchasing. And not only you have that, but you also have a budget, right? At least a mental budget, which is usually has a form of either a planned spending plus minus certain slack, right? So I know in my case, for example, I buy the groceries at home, right? I spend about $200 a week in groceries, right? I don't know if you think that's high or low. That's how much it costs us to basically eat for about a week. We barely eat out, by the way. Maybe once every 2 weeks as a family. So because of that, you know, if I go to the grocery store and my grocery bill is $189, I'm not surprised. I know I bought most of the things that I need to buy. If my grocery bill is $220, that's still, some weeks I need to buy a few more things. But for example, if one time the grocery bill is $100, I know that I'm leaving a bunch of things that I'm going to need that I'm not buying, right? So there is a certain slack that I'm comfortable with up front, and that, if it goes beyond that, I either know that I forgot stuff, or B, I know that I'm buying too many things that I was not supposed to, and maybe I have to put some of the things back. So there is this, effect where you have your list of products to buy, and then there is unplanned buying, right? As you walk through the store, you see something in the aisle, and it's like, maybe I should buy it, right? Sometimes for a good reason, you forgot to put it in the list, but you know you need it, or sometimes just because it sounds like a good idea, but not necessarily something that you need. We already talked about needs versus wants at length in class, right? There is this whole experience of impulse buying, right? We were talking about the different decision-making processes and how, I have this cognitive process, which is very involved, and, people might do quite a bit of research before buying things. At the opposite extreme of that, you have impulse buying, where you just see something and you had to have it, right? In my kid's case, Nutella, right? Or it could be gum when you go to the checkout place, right? Impulse buying is very common. Not everybody does it, but most people do. And this is the reason why when you go to the checkout aisle, it's full of knickknacks that you can spend a couple more bucks in. And things like gum, candy, maybe drinks, what else is out there? Batteries, things that you forget but that you might need. And also lighters, right, if you're a smoker. USB cables. Who knew, right? These are kind of things that are maybe not high in your priority list because of that you might forget that you need to buy them. But if you see them, it might trigger the purchase. I don't think USB cables are necessarily impulse buying. I think it's more of unplanned buying. But a lot of the items around the checkout place in most stores are impulse buying items, which tend to be low dollar value and, high instant pleasure like chocolate and candy, etc. Okay. Now, what about salespeople? Again, salespeople also play a role. Now, salespeople are not in every store, right? And the reason why is because salespeople are expensive. So oftentimes, from a strategy perspective, you only want to have salespeople for high ticket items, right? So when you buy a car, you buy a home, those two purchases, for sure, you're going to have a salesperson involved, okay? And then for other items, may or may not be, like electronics, for example, which will be also a high ticket item for most people, or at least decently high. And they might be present, or they might not be. If you buy online, no salespeople. Huh? Good. Good luck trying to buy a home online, though. Now, why are salespeople relevant? Because they have lots of expertise, and especially product categories that we don't buy often, like the two that I mentioned. Most people in their life buy 10 cars or less, right? Unless your name is Jay Leno, then maybe you buy a lot more than that, right? And the same thing with homes. How many homes are you going to buy over your life? Unless you are a realtor, you're probably going to buy 1 to 4 homes if you buy a home at all, right? Now that home ownership is less exciting, at least for some people, younger people. Anyway, so salespeople play a role because they have expertise and they know things that maybe you're not very familiar with, right? So when you're buying a home, you usually want to talk to a realtor because they know how the process works and you might not even be aware of things that you need to do, like an inspection or like having a surveyor look at the title and determine whether there are any issues with the title of the property that you're buying, etc. Right? So they do play an important role providing information that maybe you don't have and expertise that is expensive to acquire, and because of that you pay them for the service. But also what they'll try to do oftentimes and try to connect with you, build a rapport or relationship quickly. And that can be sometimes achieved by simple things like similarity, right? First, people are more likely to trust somebody that looks like them, okay? So because of that, even though people will not agree to this, but unconsciously we do it, people that are more similar to us, we tend to like more. Remember how I was talking about you meet somebody and you right away know whether you like them or not? Similarity plays a key role in there, okay? Also, incidental similarities. Those are things that you didn't know you were similar on. It's not just the way you look, but some of the experiences that you might have had in the past. Like, for example, you went to the same college, right? Or you lived in the same city, right? So when you strike a conversation, right, oftentimes salespeople will try to be fishing for information to see if, they can create a connection with you. And those usually incidental developments, things that you couldn't upfront predict, can have an important impact in how much you like the salesperson and how likely you will be to buy from that salesperson or with the help of that salesperson and be that particular product. Okay, now things have been changing and there is a shift that it's interesting, at least to me, in how people see ownership right now. So we've gone from, the American dream being owning a home, right? Maybe having a family and, hopefully having a job to pay for those, right? And be able to do a little bit, be the best you can be, right? To maybe not be so interested in property, right? If you talk to young people like yourselves, right? And not everybody's interested in owning a car anymore, which that used to be something that you would look forward to, especially when you were in high school, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? So there is a shift that is happening, and some of the reason why this shift is happening, I suspect, is this idea of the sharing economy, right? Where you can see especially expensive goods as something that can be shared across multiple users, maybe by paying a fee for the usage, right? So this is a very different perspective, and it has spawned a whole host of companies, some of which you're, very familiar with, like Airbnb or Uber, right? Two of the typical sharing economy companies that have been quite successful and controversial in some places, right? Because they are really disrupting the model of ownership that was typical before. So how does this sharing economy work? I don't think I need to explain to you, but the idea is when you have a physical asset that is underutilized, like a car, right? Think about a car, right? I own, or the bank owns two cars, right? In my case, I'm paying for them, so I guess eventually I will own them, right? Now, those two cars sit in the driveway probably about 90% of the time, probably higher than 90% if you count nights also, right? I do use them, right? One is my daily driver whenever I go to campus. That's the car I use. The other one is the one that my wife has access to whenever she wants to go anywhere, right? But especially with the pandemic, right? I don't use the cars nearly as much as I used to. And even when I was using the cars a lot, they still sit a long period of time there. So the idea of the sharing economy is, well, why can we not utilize those expensive fixed assets by just sharing, and of course paying for the share of ownership with other people, or just creating a rental service that enables you to use that asset and just leverage it. So you can have either a company that does this for you, right? Typical example would be a rental car, but those are not very exciting. Or a peer-to-peer situation where another consumer can enable you to use that physical asset, right? And this is how Airbnb works, right? You own a property, or at least, that's the idea, right? You own a property, and now you can just sell that space for certain periods of time where maybe you don't need that property, right? So if you're going to go on vacation for a month, or even better, if you're a snowbird, right, and you're going to use your property for 6 months, then what you can do is you can just give access to other people to that property, and you can just get some money back, right? So it's this idea of collaborative consumption. You have co-consumers that are going to use the physical assets that you have that are underutilized. Good. Now, ownership is changing. What about getting rid of products? Getting rid of products is something that over the last, 40 years has changed dramatically, right? And how do we dispose of products? It's also an important decision, and there is a whole set of companies and market that has accrued or created around this idea, right? And now, once that we buy a product, the way we're going to evaluate our future A, use of the product, and B, future actions towards that company or brand is going to be basically determined by how happy or unhappy we are with that product, right? So the simplest model that tries to explain how customer satisfaction works is the expectancy disconfirmation model. I cannot say that word, sorry. Now, this model, in essence, is pretty simple. It's going to be based on two variables, right? Which is what it is that your expectations are about the product. And I'm talking about performance expectations as, broadly defined performance, not only, functional performance, like in the case of a car, it will be things that first, every time you push the button, it actually starts, right? That would be basic functional performance. B, that it can actually take you from point A to point B. But also it could be things like how fast it can take you there, how fuel efficient the car is. Those are all performance expectations, right? What the sound or noise level is inside the car. Those are all performance expectations that you have. right? You have either from past experiences or because marketers have told you stories about it, right? In an ad, they might tell you how quiet a dishwasher is, right? Or how fuel efficient a car is, or how fast a car is, or how luxurious a car is, right? And then you have the perceived experience, right? So these are your expectations, and now comes your experience. If your experience and your expectations are similar, you're going to be satisfied. Okay. If your expectations are lower, so expectations lower than your perceived performance, you're going to be exceedingly happy, right? Exceedingly satisfied. You're going to be delighted, right? And on the other hand, if your expectations are higher than actually the perceived performance, you're going to be dissatisfied. That's what this model predicts. And it's simple and it works fairly well, right? And obviously what we're going to do is if we are dissatisfied with a product or a service, we're oftentimes going to either not use it, dispose of it, like I was talking about before, and we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide, or maybe buy a different product, right? So that you can maybe alternate the use, right? So understanding whether people are satisfied or not with your product is very important. In fact, most companies at this point track customer satisfaction. And so to one degree or another, they either do it internally or they hire a company to do that. Okay. And by the way, the way you test this is by asking people, right? And after the product has run its course, we either recycle it or throw it into a landfill, right? Recycling very popular. Some materials easier to recycle than others, right? Cardboard, paper, easy to recycle. Plastic, maybe not so much. There are some plastics that are coming onto the pipeline that are easier to be recycled or that are actually recyclable. Anyway, so recycling, very, very popular trend, especially if you go to some countries, the more developed the country, the more they recycle. No surprises here, right? But then you also have this idea of lateral cycling, which is instead of just throwing the product away, reusing it, either selling it online, right? Very, very popular. Options like Craigslist and eBay has really opened up a market. You also have traditional flea markets, right? Which is an old story. But the problem with flea markets is it's hard to basically get a lot of money out of products because, you know, they are used products, and you can get a lot more money out of electronic markets. And the reason why is because you're going to have access to many more buyers, right? So the fact that technology enables us to sell these products and ship them pretty much worldwide, right, enables us to maybe sell products that otherwise will never have been sold at a flea market, because we will have known that chances are nobody that is willing to pay a large quantity of money, or a decently large, for any of the products that we're trying to get rid of will actually show up by our marketplace, right? So this whole trend to move towards lateral cycling is being heavily induced by cultural changes, and you know there's a bigger concern and respect with nature in general. So that has given reason to both recycling and, you know, buying used products. And B, and maybe more importantly, technology enable us to get more of the financial gains associated with the product, because we can reach more people, and because of that, people are more likely to buy those products that otherwise maybe will be either sitting in a landfill or in our closets. Right? So what have we talked about? We've talked about a myriad of factors that influence our shopping experience, both factors that are before the shopping happens, things like mood, things like time pressure, right? Things that affect you when you are at the store, like point of purchase displays, right? The layout of the store, or maybe salespeople, and how all those factors are gonna, to a large degree, determine what the overall shopping experience is. We've also talked about how there is a trend moving away from ownership as in a traditional fashion, and because of that, there are these new options that have appeared in the sharing economy, and that we can dispose of our products after we are either not satisfied with them or the product has run its course, and we can do recycling or lateral cycling.